Good morning and afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have finally reached the climax, the conclusion, the peak, the finale, the end of the road for our um, multi-class madness series. You join us as we roll around down under around Mount Panorama for the final round of Bathurst as we see our M2s fielded by the pros, our GT4s fielded by the silvers, and our GT3s piloted by our AMD class, powering around the mountain for one final time of chaos in what was supposed to be around at Coda, but we sprung a little surprise on our GT3 field. My name is Plasma. I'm joined by Paliku'i Grant as we roll around Bathurst for the final time. How's it looking over there?
Well, it's looking pretty crazy. I mean, if we've taken a look at the practices so far, one of the things we're going to be looking out for is the M2's actually rolling over. We saw Azure there going off there at the chase, going into Murray's corner at the pit straight. It's going to be tough. Of course, this track, legendary for its racing, and it's tight corners, it's tight downhill section going down the mountain after they climb up, and it's gonna offer some very chaotic multi-class racing, as I'm hoping they could keep it clean out there. But as we all know, when it comes to different speeds and different classes, there's gonna be a lot of action and a lot of trading paint here.
Yeah, a lot of action every time we come to Bathurst, but it's going to be even crazier now the fact that we're adding 3 classes in the track at once. Of course, the slowest track being the slowest on track being the M2s, all the way up to our fastest on track being the ever loved GT3s, ranging from the big bubbling V8s of the 6.3 liters and fielded by the Mercedes, all the ways down to I believe 4 cylinders, all the ways down on those M2s, tiny little machines that are comparable more to a Miata than a race car, but all the better to race with, as we have seen them provide some of the best racing in the championship, race after race. But we're rolling through 6 minutes in practice here as we just wait for the rest of our drivers to finish gridding up, get everything sorted, and get their final setups checks done and dialed in as we get ready to tackle one of the hardest challenges on ACC.
And as we can see here, I mean, we've been following along in our helicopter here with Pescetti. I mean, just looking when you go up the hill, the roads are narrow. There's not much room to do any passing once you go along the straights. And as you can see, Pescetti's going to throw it downhill. This is the section where we will most likely see the most incidents, just coming down through Skyline and the S's. And then, of course, the next corner that they're going to hit, Pescetti right around the right, is that dipper and force elbow. I mean, if something goes wrong, and you can see here just struggling, I think grazed the wall there, even in practice. It's a tough course no matter how you slice it. And the key here is going to be just survival. All the drivers were talking earlier about what was going on and what the key here is, and I think everyone came to the conclusion that survival is the only word that matters here.
Yeah, survival and predictability, I think, those two are gonna go hand in hand. If you're not predictable, you're gonna probably get run through by a GT3, or if you're a GT3 trying to get past an M2 and you're not predictable, you might get the door closed on you, because it is not easy for the M2s to change their line. And around here, where oftentimes there is only one line, I think we're gonna see a lot of risk for reward being kind of tested, is probably the best way to say it. Going over the mountain, it's already a very, very tricky place for anything to happen. This race, the Bathurst 12-hour, historically has had multi-class in GT3 and GT4. Of course, GT3 getting all of the accolades, but it's well known for those that are experienced in that side of racing that the GT3s oftentimes get stuck behind the GT4s for significant portions, if not the entire mountain section, just due to the dangers. So now what if we had a third class and just go racing?
Yeah, no, and the thing is that in most cases, all that you could really say is it's just going to be trouble once you add another class on there. But if you really take a look, it's a cooperation between all the drivers to really make this work. And of course, it's madness out there. There's going to be differentiating speeds between the classes. They're all going to be vying for position. But ultimately, it's going to be who can avoid getting into the wall, as the margins here are just so close, with the difference between a fast lap and a devastatingly slower, damaging lap for you. And it's really just about keeping the car generally where you want and not taking too big risks when you need to, and trying to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, but I think naturally we're going to see, especially towards the end of the race, some desperation moves come in. So certainly you're going to see some people taking risks. And I almost have to put an over-under on how many cars we're going to see getting overtaken after Skyline and before the end of the downhill. I'd have to say at least 3 people will tempt fate there. How many survive? That's a different story, but I can't imagine the success rate will be 100%.
I shudder to think at any driver that will attempt here going down into Skyline and trying to go into the S's. I mean, there have been previous races I've seen in iRacing where people have attempted that, and I still remember someone made a pass in the Dipper. It was on one of the iRacing's highlights long ago, but that's just, it's rare to see that even work, because given the narrow nature of this track and the fact that when you're going through there, all you have is concrete wall on one side, concrete wall on the other side, it doesn't pan out, and the risks there just far outweighs the reward. But we'll see if there are some daring drivers that are going to attempt it. We're going to see some fireworks popping off.
Yeah, certainly some fireworks inside and outside of the cockpit. Of course, this is going to be the season finale for everyone. And we have quite a few close battles as well coming through the championship. Points gaps are pretty much as close as they can be, going all the way through our M2s, our pros. Actually, probably our biggest points gap at 10 points from Simon Luck leading the championship down to Wuschel in P2 at 56 points. And then going through the grid from there, you have some fairly small margins, relatively speaking. Another 8 points to Randomy, and from there 5 to Grimlilith. But then you jump up to the GT4s, and it's not looking too much better. The Silver Champ Caesars is holding a 9-point lead over their RRP teammate Sauce Dragon, but only 1 point between Sauce Dragon and Oraz Volpez. So Silver Championship wide open, but the one that's really crazy to think about is the AM Championship. Top 3 all dictated by about 3 points. Oily Rags leading that charge at 61, chased down by Weiss at 60, and then Electroshocks, who has been pretty consistent but hasn't been making any headlines, is sitting in P3 with 58 points. So a win for any of those drivers should, in theory, be able to clinch the championship for them. Minus, I think, Electroshocks winning and not getting the fastest lap, and then Oily finishing P2 with the fastest lap.
We're ending practice here in about, I believe, around 20 seconds, and the checkered flag should be coming out. I'm not seeing Electroshocks has joined the session yet, so it may just be down to Oily Rags and Weiss for the championship title.
Oh boy, yeah, that will throw a spanner in the works for sure, because this is a championship that Electroshocks definitely was in for a chance at. But I mean, of course, if you're gonna run a championship, you do have to make it to the races to be able to challenge that final event. We do not have our drop rounds, being only a 4-round championship this time by, but there's gonna be plenty of cars dropping down the side of the mountain as we get ready to go for qualifying here.
Yeah, as the checkered flag flies, and we're just watching Sauce Dragon come out and around the last of the drivers getting their final practice laps in, and then we're gonna hit qualifying. The key here is that when they go out there, they're just gonna need to give themselves room. There's so much margin here to lose time. You really just gotta set that lap and set it quick, because if anything goes wrong, even if you graze the wall, that's going to be an entire lap behind another chance you're not going to get, as Sauce just takes the out there and just going to slow down a bit as we wait for the checkered flag to fall for all the drivers as we switch back to Oily Rags. But, I mean, given the margin and speed difference here, it's just, and given that it's such a tough track, I want to see if anybody's going to really try and fight through this qualifying session. We might see some grazed walls by the end of this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a given. You're certainly going to see some paint left on the walls, especially on the exit of Forest Elbow. Maybe going through the cutting, we'll get a little bit, and possibly even down the skyline and dipper section. Hopefully not, though, because typically if you see any paint being traded with the walls there, you've had quite a big accident, as those walls aren't exactly the closest thing in the world, but they're close enough to punish any kind of mistake.
I'm really curious to see if any M2s are going to flip this session. They've been real squirrely. If the earlier practice sessions in the server are any indication, if any of you have seen the thumbnail for this event, yeah, you can flip the M2s pretty much anywhere. So we'll see if anyone tests the limit enough, put more than 2 wheels off, and we'll see if we get a car on the roof.
Well, a car on the roof as we get ready to raise the roof heading into qualifying for the first time here. Of course, just a reminder of our qualifying order. We're going to be starting out with the pros, and the M2s are going to be leading the field away. And we are going to be getting us out, as well as a new addition for this first round, as there's going to be a 1-minute cleanup period, just due to the fact that the start line is so far behind the pit exit. The lower class is going to get a minute kind of leeway to allow the track to be cleaned up, so we don't have GT3s coming and overtaking GT4s in their qualifying and GT4s overtaking M2s. Just kind of limits the chaos a little bit of a already very, very chaotic lobby. But we're going to be seeing Azure Goat actually taking us out for the first time here, making the first car out on track. And our pro field looking a little bit thin for the first time. Of course, 9 drivers is nothing to scoff at, but our pro field, typically the largest and almost most chaotic field, knowing how close that their races have been. But I've also taken a peek at those practice times, and the lap times are looking about as close as you could even think about asking.
I think it's the balance between that risk and reward here, and especially because you're going to gain a lot more time being smooth around here than trying to really push the M2 anywhere, given that the biggest corners are going to be coming through Forest Elbow, going around Hell Corner, and basically getting a decent run through Reed Park, Solman, and McPhilmy going into Skyline. I mean, those are the biggest ones, but I think where you just saw Azure come out, the Forest Elbow, that's going to be the most critical of all the corners. You're going to gain so much time keeping the momentum through Forest and keeping your speed up, because it's such a long straight through Conrad as they come into the chase. And so we're going to watch Azure here. He's going to be beginning his hot lap shortly. And then, Plasma, would you mind going us? We can ride along with Azure and we can go through a lap here at Bathurst.
Yeah, I don't think Azure will mind the shouter the caster shouting in his ear as we roll through the final corner, rolling out of Murray's corner and looking straight ahead to Hell Corner. Of course, the corner nicknamed for how terrible it can be for your lap time, but it is the first challenge to navigate as we break just before the 50 board. Tipped in early, get into that camber very early on throttle as we head up to the first main straight of the track, the mountain straight. As we climb up, you look ahead and see that tree line, the horizon of what you're about to climb, and the challenge that you are having to prepare yourself mentally to tackle. Spot your brake marker nice and early, hard on the brakes, and using a lot of the camber. Tipped in early on throttle again as you just let the car track on out. Decently conservative for Azure, but then we start getting into the challenge of the track. 3 into the hard braking zone for the cutting. Hugging the inside here very early on power, tons of camber, the most camber on the track as we roll through into Griffin's Mount, then a hard right into Reed Park, very, very tight here. It's going to be quite calm for the M2s. You'll see that be a bit more of a challenge for the higher classes, but then the left of Stolman Park, then immediately settling the car, getting it set up to tip it into McPhilmy Park. Probably going to be one of the most dangerous sections right there in this multi-class as we get set up now, diving down in the skyline. Very tricky section of corners. No matter what you're in, tipping the car, it's wanting to dance around. You see left, right, left, and then immediately back to the right for the final time as we then throw the car to the right, getting the car set up for Forest Elbow. Keep it very, very tight and set up for the long Conrad straight here coming out of Forest Elbow, and a lot of overtaking opportunities going to be set up coming out of that corner as we roll through the longest straight of the lap. Lots of draft battles to be ran through here, and then a quick little right hand kink coming up as we head into the chase. setting up the car for the M2s, braking quite early, 150. Very, very slowly getting that car decelerated early on power. A little bit of curb that could see the M2s tipping over. Looks like Azure did a good job of settling the car. And then one final time, spot your brake marker from Murray's corner. About 75, 80 meters. Tip it in once again very early to get the car driven out. And that's going to be our first lap time of the session, a 221.3. Surely going to be beaten, and actually already beaten by RK with a 220.0. So the first benchmarks are coming in hot, and RK already looking to stamp their authority on the field. Yeah, I mean, you make mention of the tires being up to temp. I think they're still far from it. You got to remember that these tires come in dead cold, only an ambient temperature. So it typically takes about 3-4 laps to even get them close to the operating range, which is about all these drivers are going to get with the lap times that we were running in the M2s around Bathurst here. So you're looking at maybe 2 proper attempts with the tires up to temperature. But this is going to be the next time by as we roll through. RK had been tracking pretty good on the sector times and rolling across the line. It will be an improvement to a 219.6. So we're looking for any kind of answer throughout the field. Green across the board for almost all of our drivers as RK is now pulling in, maybe happy or satisfied with their lap or trying to get in early for some tire pressure changes. Unsure so far, but Simon Lock going to be tracking across the line. Will be a small improvement, but sitting at a 219.932 instead of 99. But Randomy was able to sneak in with a 219.905. So it's going to be quite a close battle at the top as we're already looking at the rest of our drivers. Actually, green across the board for everyone. Every single one of our drivers improving. And of course, I say that one driver starts to go into the negative, but it looks like it's going to be just about staying out here and just getting consistent laps in. Yeah, it's going to be extremely detrimental too for RK to try to get those tires back at the temperature. They were looking at maybe getting 2 laps in, depending when they cross the line. I think actually seeing that they were behind Wushel, they would have only got 1 lap, but of course still hurts them with trying to get their tires back up to temperature. But regardless, we're going to be rolling through it. Every driver that crosses the line now, sitting at about 2-minute 19 lap times, this will be their final lap. As we see Simon Luck is coming to the pit, so obviously happy with where they're at. So our top 2 drivers sitting in the pits, and it's just an assault of the times behind as we roll through. Wushel is actually going to concede her lap as well as we roll through. Randomly is going to be our next challenger that is trying to contest their previous best time for pole position. Looking at needing about a 2.53 improvement, 2.5 tenths improvement on everyone else to get that pole position, but I think very, very achievable, especially now that those temperatures are starting to get into the car. And I can imagine Randomly probably working the car in a little bit better at running this longer stint. The M2s don't really fall off that much in qualifying. Ooh, but a very big bounce over the curb. That's going to cost a little bit of time. The car's not going to be putting down power the entire time, and there's a car spun around. Saber has gone around, and I think that's going to cause Randomly to bail out of their lap. Tracking their sector times, it does look like it. That's going to cost most likely way too much to be recovered. But we do have another driver too as well. Yeah, Randomly pulling over and conceding that lap. But Azure Goat as well is going to be tracking good through the sectors so far. Currently not on pace to get any kind of pole time, but at about a quarter-second improvement right now.
I think the only one back off on track is Azure Goat right now, currently tracking a decent improvement, up 4 tenths. As a matter of fact, I believe he's the last one of this class that's still out there. So let's see if Azure Goat can put in an improvement. At the current prediction, he will move up to 5th. Whoa, manages to keep it on there and does not invalidate that lap. So just like that, manages to push 1 position. And I do apologize earlier. My mic was muted during that entire commentary through RK when we were following along also with Randomly. So, but thankfully we got that resolved and we're back in. And now we're going to have the next class up. These are the GT4s as we ride along with Sauce Dragon right now. They're getting ready to start their flying laps.
Yeah, and actually you can see already the instability that Skyline offers. The Sauce Dragon was actually quite loose and almost into the tire barriers on the right-hand side there, rolling down, getting ready to just get those tires up to temperature. You can see the movement even, just getting the car under braking, and it's just twitching around a little bit. And now Sauce just giving a little bit of weaves to get them temperature into those tires, just get the car ready to go. You see the Audi GT4 behind them, the Kestrel, which is a brave choice. The Audi GT4 typically not very, very strong. So going to be really, really interesting to see how they charge through. Kestrel obviously hasn't been through the championship ringer with us, but decided to elect to come in for this final round and has historically been quite fast. So they're going to be a really interesting driver to watch. Getting ready to send the cars out for a lap. Sauce Dragon is the first GT4 to lead us around the number 73, getting ready to send it through the final corner, through Murray's Corner, and start the charge towards Hell Corner as we roll down the main straight for the first time, hard on the brakes. About the same brake markers as the M2, so a little bit more power, but also a little bit better braking performance. Does put you about the same brake markers. And this long drive up the hill as we get ready to set up for turns 2 and 3. The GT4s, I think, are going to really benefit from this slipstream here, and it's going to be really interesting to see what cars thrive on the straights. But we roll through into turn 2. This front engine Mercedes is going to be dancing around, rolling through on the exit curb and just using all that track. This is going to be a great car, a great platform for this very big challenge. Little bit late on getting the car into the cutting there, but still good momentum held from what I could tell from Sauce Dragon as we roll through, going up the hill as we get through Reed Park, then into Solman, tipping the car up to the wall, and then finally into McPhilmy. And this is the part of the track where we saw Sauce Dragon getting a little bit loose while warming the tires. Is it going to be the same story? Straighten the car out quite a bit, not the ideal line, and unsettling the line quite a bit, actually. So that's going to cost Sauce Dragon quite a bit of time. Of course, the tire's not up to temperature. Same issue as the M2s. No tire blankets, so these tires do come out very cold. And we roll through Forest Elbow and very, very deep, wanting to keep that car very, very tight. But we see Sauce Dragon pushing about 2 cars wide, so picking up a lot of understeer, maybe a little bit too late on the brakes, but they're definitely leaving so good room for improvement. A good cider lap for Sauce Dragon, that's for certain, as they're going to know what's coming up for this next lap to come.
Yeah, no, definitely. And of course, you want to bank the lap you can now, because given that the treacherous nature of this course, was you go up and down the mountain, just getting a lap in that's validated. As it hits the curb a little bit, gets a little squirrely and bounces the suspension, but manages to hang on. And Sauce Dragon's going to come around the final corner here, going into Murray's corner. Is going to bank a lap, and then now knows what's to come for the next one. Hopefully, can get it a little bit cleaner. Is just barely nicks the grass there, and of course, you see the first time coming out there a 2:13.2, and of course. All the other drivers are going to be coming through now and setting their first flying laps, I think. But right now, Sauce Dragon up there, and then, of course, Zizor's right behind with a 2:13.045. I mean, so far, even with the mistakes, all of them are really close right now. All in the 2:13s for the top 3 right now as they come across the line. Of course, I believe we're still waiting for Skylar to get in. Cameras just set a time at 2:15 in there. Skylar with 2:16, and so they're all starting their second flyers right now. We shall see if there's any improvements across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, you'd expect the improvements to come through, and I mean, right now, everyone's tracking in the green from what we can see on our timing screens. Leparcher taking the drive up the mountain to KTM, a very bold choice for this final round of the season. Of course, locked in for this whole season once they pick that KTM. This is definitely going to be the track that exposes that car the most, lacking that top end speed, but very, very strong over the mountain. So maybe we see some heroics with that car, but it's going to be a challenge for Leparcher to really send that around the track. But of course, sitting at about a half-second improvement already. So really, really looking to take that challenge all the way to the front right now as we roll through into McPhilmy and down in the skyline. A very big bobble over the curb, but that KTM just settling itself down, rolling through a little bit wide there as we get ourselves tipped into the dipper, which caused a little bit of a late turn in. Not the best momentum from Leparcher, but still keeping good pace down the mountain as we roll into Forest Elbow. Are they able to keep it all the way tight? Looks like they were able to, getting the car on power nice and early and driving it down that straightaway. And it's going to feel like the longest straightaway in the world for Leparcher in this KTM. The car just struggling on that straight line speed and just wanting to get it over with as we roll through. And you can see that Mercedes-Benz tackling the chase very aggressively in front.
Meanwhile, we have Kestrel up here. The improvement is massive right now. 0.9 seconds going into Murray's corner. If they can keep the momentum. And surprising with the Audi GT4, but that's 1.1 seconds up the board. Indeed, a 2:12.545. A impressive time, to say the least, given the improvements that are coming through now. And that's going to be tough to beat, as Zizor's, I think, is on another flyer trying to best it.
Yeah, looking for improvements across the board. Of course, Kestrel put in quite an impressive time with the Audi. Typically one of the weakest GT4s, so very, very impressive from Kestrel to see that time coming in, really making use of that V10 in the back of that car and looking already for another improvement as we roll through. So Kestrel is on a charge. Those tires are really coming into a window, and Kestrel very, very happy with the car that is underneath them. Of course, we got a couple other drivers that are going to be competing for that pole position, but with time running out, just about 2.5 minutes left for each of our drivers to set a lap. It's going to be this next lap for everyone else. So the time is very quickly ticking down as we see. Actually, there was a little bit of a mistake there and a big slide for Kestrel coming over the top of the mountain. It's going to cost them quite a bit of time. We're going to slip over the curb, so yeah, the Audi's starting to just move around just a little bit, but I think that's going to be good news for Kestrel, learning right where that limit is and just reel it back in for that final go right at the end of the lap.
Yeah, Kestrel was up about 4/10 going into the cutting after Quarry Bend, after the second turn of the course, and when exiting the cutting, they pushed the power down and their rear end slid out quite something fierce, managed to catch it and lost all of that time coming up, now down 0.4 of a second here, but that's not what they're really looking for now. They got one more shot at this course, coming around, going into the chase. And of course, they're going to try and do their best. We're going to hop along right now with Skylar right now. Up a decent amount in that nice GT4 Camaro as Skylar comes down through the Forest Elbow, going into Conrad straight up about a second. Gained a ton of time there. Might have just been going a bit slower in the lap before when he said it, but now on track. If Skylar can finish this lap at its predicted time right now, we'll move up a couple of positions, possibly past Leparcho for 6th. We'll see if Skylar can get all the way down there, as of course this is that one straight. You just got to make sure everything is, you know, nice and steady. Take a deep breather before you go back into the chase. I think that's the biggest thing, is eats that corner, eats the curbing quite up, and actually gains even more time out of it. It's now about 1.2 seconds up their last time, and is coming through now Murray's corner, the last corner of the track, and goes wide, but manages to keep it validated. Lost some time there, and unfortunately that's what all it took. Could have been 6, but unfortunately just behind Blade Wolf with a 2:15.492. And then, of course, he's got one more lap, so we'll see if he can improve. It's going to be tough, but we'll see.
Yeah, but Skylar's going to be really kicking themselves because a mistake in the Murrays there really cost them going on to their final lap. Of course, it kills all of your momentum, not to mention the fact that it kills your previous lap. And the fact that they made that mistake cost them about 300s and actually very, very deep into the wall there into turn 2. So I think that frustrated them, and they just were trying to push that extra bit of time out, knowing that the first 22 turns of their lap were near perfect. They just needed to get that last one, and it unfortunately wasn't there. But we see Blade Wolf tracking through the top of the mountain there and rolling through as we're getting set up for McPhilmy, and it looks like a fairly lackadaisical lap, not using all the traffic or all the track here. And looks like Blade Wolf, yeah, bailing out of that lap, not in any position to complete as we look through the field. Cohen looking for some kind of improvement in the Maserati. Very, very brave soul to be driving the Maserati all season, but even braver now to be driving it in Bathurst. No assist, nothing to help out the number 2 as he rolls into Skyline for the final time in qualifying. And actually quite well put together. The car looks very compliant actually over there, or over that crest, and rolling through the power, getting put down quite nicely. So is this going to be a strong lap for Cohen as we roll into Forest Elbow? Oh, you can see the car was super uncompliant there. Lots of understeer. Didn't want to get slowed down at all, and that's going to really have cost them on the exit and on the run to this Conrad straight. Talked about it being a very, very long straight. A lot of passing opportunities, so mistake you really want to avoid coming into the race, but you're going to be bleeding time down this entire straight.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, you don't want that. But, of course, you got to make do with what you have. Running the Maserati, I mean, it's... I give Cohen all the props for actually running it. It's a difficult car to drive in this sim. And, you know, it's not exactly... You're not exactly setting blazing times, but, you know, you're still out there with everyone else, and you're just going to do the best you can. And I can't knock Cohen for that at all as they come around, hopefully for a little bit of improvement, taking it easy through Murray's corner. And that should be the end of this class, as now the next class, and finally all of our GT3s in the AM class start to head out.
Yeah, we roll around for our main event. All of our GT3s have been released. That 1 minute cleanup time has been cleared, and we are getting ready to go. So there's every imaginable combination of engines and cars as we roll through the field. Only 2 repeat manufacturers across the entire GT3. Actually, sorry, 3, I can't count, being our Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche rolling through this grid. But everywhere else, actually, sorry, 2 Ferraris in the grid as well. So apparently I can't count because they come in pairs. They come 2 by 2, but Zephyr is going to be putting all 4 tires to the track as we roll through and get ready for the first lap of the GT3s, the main event. Our AMs finally getting ready to take it to the road and put the pedal to the metal as we roll through hard on the brakes for the Viper Sadies. I think we coined it.
I think we coined it, yeah, the Viper Sadies.
Yeah. Rolling through turn 1, a little bit timid as we start the lap, starting to get everything going nice and smooth and get the car set up for the long straight. Going down towards turn 2, getting hard on the brakes around that 100-meter board. Actually, a little bit later for our GT3, and the Viper Mercedes is going a tiny bit deep, but still getting the car slowed down, driving it up the hill for the first time, and getting the car tipped in. The cutting very early on power. Let the car drive out and open the car up throughout this entire section. Keep the momentum. It's very easy to spin a tire. And a tight section for the GT3s. It is supposed to be flat out, but not comfortably flat out. If you get that line wrong at all, you're going to be going hard into the outside wall immediately after and repark there. But then we go into McPhilmy, and then we immediately have to transition to Skyline. The hardest section for these GT3s. Very easy to unsettle the car. Very quick. And a single mistake puts you in that wall. Through the dipper, hard left, early on power. Get the car driven out to the outside wall. And then open this corner all the ways up. Hard on the brakes for Forest Elbow. Earlier than you think, otherwise you're going to track out. Kept it nice and tight for the Viper Mercedes of Zephyr. And we roll down the long Conrad straight for the first time. And you get to hear that beautiful V8 rumble from the Mercedes just roar down the straight.
Zephyr's absolutely throwing it into all of these corners. I mean, you could just see how tight the Zephyr wanted to keep the line going down through Forest Elbow, and now it's coming through the chase, just absolutely hooking it up in there, just avoiding the curb just a little bit, making sure it keeps the car settled after coming out of the chase, and then finally going to Murray's corner. We shall see what time is there to beat here in the benchmark lap for Zephyr. Coming around now, the final Murray's corner onto the start finish line, and Zephyr then starts us off with a 2-minute 5.08. And there's the time difference there. You have the GT4s that are on 2:12s, and then of course these vehicles 7 seconds faster.
7 seconds faster. That's their first lap too, mind you, and it's going to get even faster because we still have our front runners in the GT3 category that need to set their pace. Only setting right now is Zephyr and JPEG, and there is that first shout from our front runners, a 204.567, and then we still are waiting for the rest of our grid to put in their laps. Pescetti coming in with a 208.5. So looking to improve on that lap time, but we're looking for Olyrag, seeing what they're tracking, as they're our championship leader right now. We've already seen their competitor Weist to put in a lap, but coming through the chase, we roll through onto the final straight, going to Murray's, and just need to get that Aston through one more corner to try to navigate and put that benchmark time on. See, very well put together. Good compliance from the Aston on the entry there. And it's going to be a 203.6 for our Aston Martin driver of Oily Rags and our championship leader. So looking to stamp their authority nice and early. A lot of dust thrown up from that BMW directly in front of them. I think that is Tiki in that BMW directly in front of them. Hard to get a tell from that angle. I think they're the only other BMW on here.
I think so. Let's see here. That is looks like the number 20? That is Tiki. Yes, that is indeed Tiki the Wicker Beast going out there in their BMW. Right now, yeah, I mean, impressive so far to say the least. I mean, I was saying 7 seconds faster. And here we have Oily Rags now on an improvement almost half a second. He did a 203.6, almost 10 seconds faster than the GT4s. I mean, if that's going to be the closing speed of these, it's going to be one massive chaotic race.
I mean, you're looking at 16 seconds to the M2s, and that's only the first flyer. Only going to get faster, and I know some of these drivers are going to be capable of almost 2-minute 1 times, sitting at 2-minute 2s looking at practice. So we could see a potential gap of 18 seconds per lap, assuming everyone is rolling at qualifying pace every single lap. So that could be a very, very big challenge for these drivers to navigate, as we see Oily Rags really just throwing the car through Forest Elbow and getting a charge down onto the Conrad straight and tracking very, very good through those first 2 sectors as we roll down for the second time for Oily Rags. Right underneath the bridge, get the car set up all the way to the left, use that extra bit of runoff to enter the braking zone of the chase. Hard on the brakes, and this where you can throw away your lap so easily with a little bit too much curb, and that's quite a bit of curb from Oily Rags. But getting the car straight, getting that power down, I don't think going to be losing too much, and into the final corner here of Murray's, getting the car tipped in. Good rotation, not using any of that inside curb and letting the car drive out. Another big improvement of 202.7. So there's that second improvement that we are talking about being a possibility. Now that gap opening up to 17 seconds between the classes. And you can only imagine, second lap in, Oily Rag surely has more to go.
Meanwhile, we're looking at JPEG Fox here. We're going to go on board with him. I mean, he's up trying to get it. Ooh, looks like makes some sort of massive mistake coming through Skyline. Lost a lot of time, but then manages to pick it back up again. And then going through there, going down in the Dipper. If JPEG Fox can just improve just a little bit, he's eyeing that podium position from Zephyr that's just ahead. Now up by a second. If you can hold that time, get a little bit more, might have something to go on there. Is going to need to improve a lot more, but right now we got Oily Rags in first, Weiss in second, and I think Weiss is just calming down now. We got Swingley that made his way up to third now, just manages a 205.042, Zephyr with the 205.08, and then JPEG right now with the 206.9, hopefully going to try and get that up to maybe a 205.7, 205.6, trying to make it just a little bit closer, and then going for that one last flyer as we reach the 90-second mark here at qualifying. We're going to have one more lap to go, at least for JPEG, and most likely the rest of the drivers too. Is yes, indeed, that's a 205.7 from JPEG, and now everyone's on their last flyers.
Aside from, I think, maybe Swingley, they're very, very close cut off, but it looks like JPEG going over the line, and that actually, I do believe, invalidated their lap there. So this is just going to be practice, but rolling through, this is going to be our first driver either getting cut off or our last driver to get that final lap, as they're right on that cutoff, depending how quickly they're able to hustle this Porsche GT3 around the lap. As well, there's Zephyr directly in front. I believe we'll be able to sneak it one in as well. But rolling through, these is top two drivers, and they're directly battling each other in terms of lap time. So very interesting to see that they're right nose to tail on track. Rolling through Forest Elbow, you see the Viper Mercedes followed by the Blender Porsche, rolling down onto that Conrad straight, and it's close. 30 seconds to get all the ways down this straight and into that final corner. It's going to be very, very tight to see if either of these two drivers make it. Swingley is tracking 1.2 seconds to the good for the first two sectors, so looking for some kind of improvement for them, and I think they might just run out of time with only 10 seconds left. So it's just going to be about maximizing this lap and getting through the track for the final time. 5 seconds. Yes, I do believe they're going to run out of time. Is Zephyr going to be able to make it? No, they're not. So this is confirmed the final lap for every one of our drivers rolling through, and it's a big improvement for Swingley. Is it going to be big enough though? Swingley stepping up to P2 with a 2-minute 3.4, but as we roll through the rest of the grid, there's big improvements everywhere. 1.2 seconds to the good for Weiss. They're going to be looking to track down that pole position with a 1.2 seconds. They need to look for a little bit more time. That gap's sitting at about 1.3 seconds that they need with only 2 meaningful corners to go. This is going to be full commitment from the BMW driver, getting over to the right-hand side, hard on the brakes, getting set up for the chase, and rolling through, really avoiding that curve. We saw Oilies get unsettled by that quite a bit, and getting the drive down towards Murray's. And one final time through the final corner, is Weiss able to match that pole position time from Oily Rags, or are they going to have to settle for P2? They're going to have to settle for P2, a 2-minute 3.1. So Oily Rags are only driver in the 2-minute 2s. Our last driver, JB, is currently on an invalid lap. Don't think anyone else is further down the grid setting any lap times. No, nothing valid that I can see. So that's going to be our grid for the top GT3 class. I almost called them the pros because it felt like it for a moment there looking at Oily Rags time. But a great lap coming in from our top class.
Yeah, no, they were putting on some absolute flyers out there for GT3 as we take a look here. I mean, we got Oily Rags on top with a 202.7. I mean, that is impressive. Now a full 10 seconds ahead of the times that the GT4s are setting, and a good 18 seconds ahead of what the M2s are setting. I mean, the margin for these racers between the top class and between the slowest class here is going to mean that they're probably going to catch considerably quickly. I would say, what do you think? Lap 4, 5? I
I
mean,
think that might be a little bit aggressive on the guess. I'd say we've seen most of our first kind of jaunts through traffic have been around 20 minutes. So what? That's maybe 10 laps. I'd say that's probably a safe guess is around lap 10, maybe 9, 10, depending the chaos. Of course, if there's any accidents, that's of course going to throw any predictions out the window. Maybe you're ready for that, but on just pure pace, I'd have to guess we're sitting around that 10 lap mark. Maybe I'll go with lap 9 just to be a little conservative.
Yeah, I set the more aggressive because I mean I'm guaranteeing that the majority of the M2 drivers and the Silvers they're gonna be together. They're gonna be racing each other because the margin between them is a little bit closer. And given that, you know, consistency here is key, and keeping it clean. I mean, it's just once you go side by side with someone here, you lose so much time. Whew,
Yeah,
but
I
wow.
it's a challenge for sure. Going side by side here is, I mean, oftentimes you don't see it just because of the fact that it carries so much danger. But look at those gaps between the pros. We did not have enough time to really kind of appreciate that. The gap for pole position, less than 1/10 of a second, and the top three covered by a 1/4 second. Like, very, very close for the M2s, and we know how draft-centric these cars are, so they're going to be producing an amazing race coming through, and I can't wait to see what's going on in that TCX class. Of course, they've always produced that great racing, as I mentioned, but I think this race is going to be no exception. It's going to be filled with danger, of course, as we roll through the grid.
Yeah, and as I mean, if we take a look here too, I mean, it's almost quite the same for the top two here. We got Kestrel and Sauce Dragon in the GT4s. I mean, they're split by 1/10. The third for the podium is 1/2 a second. I mean, that's pretty competitive up there. The two Mercedes up against the Audi, which is quite a surprise. What do you say? Because the Audi's not normally strong in the GT4.
No, the Audi is really not the strong car, so Kestrel has taken quite the leap of faith to take that GT4 Audi R8 to the front row in Bathurst, of all places, a track that really requires a lot of commitment, and I know they really only decided kind of last minute to even elect to do this race, so a very, very strong showing from them to be able to put that Audi R8 on pole position. And then, of course, we saw the lap that Oily Rags put in and how committed it was. Of course, Weiss trying to match it, maybe just some mistakes right at the end of the lap, costing them the chance to really challenge for that. But we've seen those two jockeying back and forth every single race, so it's not like a gap in qualifying means anything against Weiss in that 366 BMW. But, of course, it means that they just need to put the work in the race. They won't be starting from that pole position, but they'll be starting in the next best spot.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see, and I'm not sure why that popped up, but okay. So we're going to be going through our track walk here at Bathurst, and we're going to start off here with, of course, Oily Rags. We saw him in that Aston Martin just doing an absolute flyer of a lap. That 2:02.7, enough to put him on pole here today as we move across the grid in the next spot, lining up right next to him in second place with Weiss. So close, only down 4/10, but of course, as we said, they've been fighting all championship for this, so they're going to be making it hopefully an interesting start here. And of course, lining up in row 2, we got Swingley in third in their Blender Porsche, and of course, they set an impressive time too, only 2/10 off from Weiss, so it's really close there up in the front in the top 3. It's going to be an interesting battle to see who can come up top in this podium today. Of course, lining up next to him at the Viper Sadies is Zephyr, and trying to make good on what's going to be possibly a incident-filled race. You're going to make sure you got to keep it clean out there, and of course, Zephyr is going to look to do that to gain one of those podium spots. Lining up now in row 3, we got the Bluey car, Derg, in that nice Ferrari out there in 5th place here today, and then right next to them is JPEG Fox in their nice, beautiful Fox Porsche here. Always nice to see, and quite a bit surprising in the back there. We got, of course, Peschetti and their nice, beautiful RNG Mercedes there. Good with the D20. I always thought that D20 pattern looked good. And then, of course, right next to them in 8th place, we have Lappy in their Lamborghini here with RRP Racing. And then, of course, JPay in the Lexus. A surprising choice in the car. But, of course, they're going to be making the most at what they're going to be doing today. And that wraps up the GT3 Field 4M. Now, starting off in pole for the GT4 Silvers, we have Castro in their Audi. Again, a surprising choice, but manages to put it on pole, and it's going to look to drive that all the way home for the win today in their class. Lining up right next to it in 11th place is Sauce Dragon in their Mercedes, number 73 car, looking to see if they can get the run on Castro coming in at the start. Then, of course, lining up next to him in 12th place is Zzors. Of course, we've got a couple of teammates here in their Ridge Racer Project Mercedes here, so hopefully they might team up and see if they get to Castro. We'll see when the race starts. Lining up next to him in 13th, Ares Vopez in their Janetta 406. Of course, we've seen this Janetta on course all season long, and of course, Ares trying to make a good result here. Hopefully going to snatch another podium today. Cameras lining up in 14th here in their GT4 Camaro here. Going to look to see if they can get a good result as, of course, Tiki, the Wicker Beast. I am so sorry about that. Lining up in 15th in a beautiful pink and black yellow livery here. It's going to be interesting to watch. Of course, Leparcho lining up in 16th there with their KTM on 16th place, and then behind them, Blade Wolf in 17th with their AMR Aston Martin here. Skylar Vixen lining up right now in 18th place, the number 660 Camaro, also looking to improve, as well as, of course, Cohen, rounding out your field for GT4 in their Maserati here. The number 2 car, of course, gonna hope to survive and maybe pick up some free spots along the way. Then, of course, finally, we get to our pro field in the M2, starting off with RK with an impressive lap time as they set, of course, only beating their opponent, Simon Luck, by less than 1/10 of a second. So it's going to be very close. And of course, only 2/10 behind there is Randomy lining up 22nd, and that is your top 3 in qualifying here as they're running up the hill now, getting ready to start the race. Right behind them in 4th in their class and in 23rd overall is Denak, looking to make some improvements and make sure they keep in the fight overall. Not even 6/10 off the time overall there, so I mean, we had the top 5 here all within 6/10 of a second. Azure Goat lining up behind him in 24th place in the number 765 Ridge Racer Project M2, hoping to get a good result here today. Of course, Wusho behind them and the number 69 car there. Of course, we have Kivik in 26th, looking to gain a few spots after a not very impressive qualifying session, but of course the margin there is so thin. Of course, they're going to be looking at to gain a few spots here. Behind Kivik, we have in the 27th place, Vossi in Pig Gang Racing in their nice Tiger M2, number 15 car. Then behind him, we have Saber in 28th, looking to get some positions off the field in the start and hopefully not end up in the thumbnail. Special thanks to Saber for being the poster child for today's race. Then we have Phaser in 29th place, and I believe these are, this one is an AM class driver that ended up in the back, and unfortunately, looks like they're having a little bit of trouble getting at the start, and of course, Classy Fennekin. So these two are AM drivers that it looks like they did not make qualifying, so they will actually be starting in the back, and they're going to be making their way through the class. And then, of course, rounding out is our safety car, led by Firebrand Page. Big thanks to them, and they will be in the back here, making sure that anything that happens at the start will be covered. And that is your grid here today at Bathurst.
So we did say that it was going to be a lap, what, 4 and 9 that the GT3s were going to catch the M2s. I don't think either have expected us lap 0.
I didn't think so either, but here we are.
So surely going to be a little bit of chaos coming out of that. I can only imagine, as those M2s are going to roar up the hills, and the GT3s in the back of the pack really going to be looking for any gap that they can on a track that barely can hold 2 wide. We're going to probably end up going 4 wide because, of course, you want to get through that pack. You want to get set up for the race, and you don't want to be held up because it is very, very easy to lose too much time that you won't be able to compete for the rest of the event, relatively speaking, on pace-wise. But of course, they do have company with each other, so it is going to be a rather interesting affair for them. But all eyes have shifted all the way to the front as we see our M Championship battle taking that front row lockout. Oily Rags and the 83 Aston Martin taking the trip around the inside of Murray's as we get set up to run for the final time. The eyes shift up and get ready to go green as we get ready to close out this multi-class of Madness Championship. And it is green, 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 and it is Swingley with a very good start to the inside, taking the inside in the one, trying to make that move for that pole position, and all the way up into the lead. The Aston Martin very, very weak off the start. We see JPEG, I think, in the background there without off track and is stuck in the gravel, but Swingley trying to make a charge with those warm tires. A very, very good leap off of the corner. Are they able to stick it around the outside to turn 2? And looking like they can, and yes, so a big dive for the 279, and it's Oily Rags having to concede. Weiss is settling down in 3rd place, but under pressure from Zephyr in that number 7 Viper Sadie's, trying to make a move up the inside, and Dirk almost in the wall as we roll through the cutting, as you see the GT3s really start to tackle the brakes for the first time in competitive spirit, and rolling up into the mountain section. All the cars starting to fan out into Reed Park, setting up all the ways down at the Solomon, the compression, and then over the crest, settling the car for McPhilmy, and then you get ready for the challenge for the first time. That is the downhill, rolling into Skyline, and the dirty air is going to start to really kick in. Any mistakes coming from these drivers could immediately lead to terminal damage, but it looks like everyone well behaved, able to get the cars settled down through the dipper. All of our drivers very well managed through there, and then into Forest Elbow as we get ready for a charge for the first time. Is this going to be a possible move into Forest Elbow? No, as we have to see JB probably looking for a move on this straight. Had to back out of the brakes there to not drive through the rear into Pescetti. But that Lexus very, very strong in the straights and could be looking for some kind of challenge going down into the chase here. But side by side through the kink, really, really dangerous, looking to set it up on the brakes. Is it going to be a late dive? No, having to settle down. So the 242 lives to survive another day, but wide. And this 117 is also wide and almost in the grass and spun around. But both our drivers able to recollect themselves and settle themselves down. Actually, Pescetti losing out with that off-track moment there. And it looks like it's going to be J-Bay taking that promotion to P6. And now our M2 is just trying to survive as Arcade was able to stay in front. Actually, I think Arcade got the jump on Simon and it was able to take that P1 position, as now we see the 87, I believe, of Lappy starting to filter through the M2s. And you can see those GT3s couldn't get through in that first lap. Just that being the difference of the pace and not being able to get through the pack. JPEG, who we saw off track in the background there, now trying to filter their way through, and these M2s starting to get fanned out, mainly just due to the virtue of traffic directly in front of them. As we now roll through lap 2, the second time over the hill, drivers starting to settle down, getting a little bit more confident in the handling of their cars, and getting ready to drive for the next hour of chaos.
And wow, what a start. Let's just recap what happened. I mean, we had an incident in the very beginning. JPEG Fox unfortunately had to pull back. I think that was an incident in turn 1. Maybe made contact on the start, but of course the big winner, Swingley, with an amazing start up there. I mean, manages to gain 2 positions, going from 3rd to 1st in basically 2 corners. And then of course J-Bay up 3 positions, tackling through some of those GT3s and managing to get through. Of course, that nice pass on Pescetti in which they're going through. Meanwhile, Tiki the Wicker Beast as well, managing to gain 5 positions, now up to 10th. Oh, it looks like they're under threat with Araz right now, who's trying to also gain. But of course, the big winner out of all of this, Swingley, up 2 positions, now leading. Of course, Oily is hunting them down, trying to get by them as they come down through Conrad straight into the chase up to the kink. And of course, this is an hour race. We are only 4 minutes into the second lap, so they're going to settle down hopefully, and Oily is going to have a comeback for sure.
We did see a change of lead in the GT4s as well, though Kestrel lost out to Sauce Dragon, so that Audi maybe not as strong off the rip of the race, as Sauce Dragon was able to get in the lead and is actually sitting with a little bit of a gap, 1.1 seconds, so maybe a little bit of traffic induced gap through there as some of our drivers are starting to get moved around. But oh, that Mercedes right over the curb, just clunking over that inside curb of Murray's, and that Audi immediately behind, just trying to charge. You see the BMW of Tiki the Wicker Beast trying to close down that gap and just get back into the GT3 pack here. Of course, one of the drivers that did start in the middle of the GT4 pack and just due to the virtue of their qualifying and just trying to filter it through. But Randomy is now currently under assault from Denak, rolling through the final corner. Denak with the switchback, and Randomy actually a little bit wide, very, very squirrely. You're going to lose out 2 positions there to Vossi as well. So the TGR cars are looking to drive forward to the front of the field, currently sitting P4, P5, and that is their target directly up the field, directly up the straightaway. So that is the top 3 podium positions that they are going to be locked onto. Denak now sights forward to Azure Goat as we see side by side Sabers going alongside with Vic into turn 2, and this is not exactly the preferred line for Saber, but does look like they have a better run. Needs to really be brave on the brakes to hold the momentum, and Vic is actually going to manage to get the run on the inside there, hold the position, and then once again having to settle for another run over the mountain behind a slower car.
And I think right now, right behind him, that's Phaser in the 574 Ferrari, looking to get by these M2 cars. Might affect the battle, but I'm gonna head up as I think Laparcho had an incident. Oh yes, right up. That is, oh, we see, I think that was Lappy that hit the wall there as Laparcho was trying to get around. That is Skyline, the entrance of Skyline, as we see. That's JPEG that just gone by. And oh no, Laparcho just has to wait as the M2 field goes by. Oh, reverses into, I think that was Denak and Vossi. That's 2 TGR cars. That's the entire TGR team, I think, that were involved there. And I think we have a code 50. I believe everyone is slowing down now.
Yeah, that's the TGR car of GT4 just taking out 2 TGR cars at M2. That's not a debrief that I would want to be a part of. But I think the only TGR car not involved in that is RK. So, I mean, still holding the lead of M2. So, overall, good result for the team. But, I mean, that's 3 of the 4 cars all taken out in one incident. And that is honestly the most dangerous spot that you can be spun around at, as we see the BMW in the background actually hounding Zephyr. Such was the moment in which that code 50 was called, that the BMW is just basically pushing the Mercedes here. And to the point that actually, if there's any difference in pit speed limiter, that BMW might actually be able to run into the back of the Mercedes. But the code 50 is released as we roll through here. And actually, the GT3 Mercedes seems like it gets such a good start compared to that BMW. But JBay looking to promote themselves into that P5 position. Durg is trying to hold on to the inside as we roll up over the mountain for the fourth time now. Losing track already as we get ready for more chaos. And to the inside of the cutting, a very brave placement. JBay starts to back out, conceding that to Durg. A very, very brave move. It requires a very compliant driver to be able to make that happen. But, oh, we have a battle down in P1 for GT4 as well. It's going to be Kestrel looking for a challenge into turn 2, but just not able to get it to stick. But, oh, this looks like it's going to be our battle for the race, because Kestrel is all over the rear wing of Sauce Dragon right now. And Sauce Dragon does not look like they are in any mind to try to concede this position.
No, and right now, of course, I mean, this is the battle for first in GT4. So Sauce is going to do everything they can to keep Kestrel at bay. But, of course, we saw how strong Kestrel is. But noticing, I'm seeing that Audi is a little squirrely throughout some of the corners, so we got to be careful not to use up too much of the tires and not to slide too much of theirs. I mean, you can just see that Audi is almost flying over the top, going McPhilmy Park into Skyline. That car looks like it wants to leave the ground, but of course that's costing Kestrel a little bit of time as they're slowing here. As now we pop up to Oily Rags here, catching up to Swingley. Of course, this is going to be the battle most likely of the race. These two are gonna be going at it for the majority of this race today. I mean, Oily Rags had an impressive qualifying, but Swingley, I mean, that start was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, huge start for Swingley to really just rocket past the front row. Of course, the front row of the Aston Martin BMW, both being turbo cars, they tend to deal with a little bit of turbo lag. Oh, we have a spin at the top of the hill of Skyline. We saw how dangerous this was last time. Oh, and maybe an incident for Vic. They're able to save it, but oh my goodness.
And another code 50 has been
very
called.
Close.
Another code 50 has been called, so now everyone's going to slow again. And yeah, unfortunately, I mean, that incident right there through McPhilmy Park, it's so difficult to get started once you're there.
Yeah, very, very good save from Kvik as well as JPEG is a very, very dangerous spot. Of course, Kvik, I think,
I think
dropping a tire onto the grass as well once they were going around the
think
number 12 Porsche.
I
Uh,
think JPEG might have some damage. Let's take a look at that rear wing.
okay. That's just toxic. That ain't right. Nah, nah, that ain't right. See, that's broken. You can see the scratches on the rear wing. There's nothing on here. It's
There's
quite
just-
simple.
There's just nothing there,
Anyways.
right? All right.
Anyways, the battle for GT4 lead. I'm sure that's going to be an interesting thing going on up there. As we roll through the pack, there's actually quite a few battles going on as we roll through here. The GT4 battle here. Blade Wolf looking for the inside of Skylar Vixen. This is for P6 in class. Skylar just able to manage to keep that line, that preferred line into turn one as we roll down into the main straight here. And it looks like that American-powered Detroit muscle machine is going to be just running away from Blade Wolf in that Aston Martin. Of course, another V8 there, but not as much power, it doesn't look like. But the M2s now really pushing each other with that draft. Looks like Simon Luck's actually falling back a little bit from RK, a little bit more than they had before. Whereas Azure Goat's actually really starting to pressure that gap and maybe look for a move. Half a look coming to the inside of two and almost pushing Simon Luck through the corner as we roll through into turn two. Randomy also looking to try to get a move in here as well. So this is going to be a 3-car battle for P2, but once again settling over the mountain, but Azure looking very impatient and ready to pounce for that P2 position.
You gotta be careful. You're not too much on the throttle there. You're gonna slide out too much. You're gonna overheat your tires. You're not gonna be able to keep up with Simon Luck. But I mean, Azure, you can clearly tell Azure wants that position. Azure is pushing it going up the hill. But now you gotta be a little bit more conservative here. You're not gonna have a move to make going through McPhilmy Park and into Skyline. And of course, right now, I think the gap's a little too far. He's not gonna dive here. So it's just playing the waiting game, getting the good launch from Forest Elbow into Conrad, and then we might see a pass coming around this time by. We'll see if Azure gets a better exit from Simon, but if Simon can hold him and get a decent exit out of there, then that just might be the ticket Simon needs to hang out a little longer. As you can see, yep, here is out, but no, Azure looks like it might have gotten a decent exit. As we switch on over to looking at both of them, and of course, these are draft-centric cars, so Azure right now has the advantage because Simon Luck doesn't have anyone in front. Coming in about 3/10 now, just edging along, trying to make sure that he sees him in the mirror, and now he's getting really close. See if he actually makes a move and late breaks into the chase, and that won't be so. And Azure looks like he's going to wait another day, possibly waiting for Simon to make a mistake. And we're only 10 minutes through this, and there's battles everywhere on track. I won't be surprised if Azure is probably looking at going to the long game, as I think there is some damage to the front of his car.
Yeah, but we've seen the M2s are very resilient cars. I mean, you can have a ton of damage and it costs you maybe a 10th or 2. As long as the steering is straight, you just need to give a good run down the straight. As we see a good run down the straight for the Aston Martin, this is a battle for the overall lead. Ollie is looking, or Oily Rags looking for the inside and is going to take it into the chase, into turns 20 and 21, and is going to take the overall lead from Swingley. The 279 not able to hang on with that superior top-end speed of the Aston Martin, really just powering past and into Murray's. As we see, Oily Rags has really solidified that position now, starting to open up the gap to Swingley, and behind, Zephyr is going to be filling the gap between Swingley and So Wee's not even on the podium right now. Our championship protagonists currently with quite a big gap between them. You see them, that's red car in the background. The second red car is our other championship leader looking to challenge for that AM champ overall actually position. Just that gap just opening up a little bit more and more every single lap, but I don't think Swingley's ready to give up this position.
No, but I think Swingley made a major mistake coming out of Forest Elbow, which allowed Oily Rags to come through, and as you see, there was another major mistake by Swingley coming in. Oh, and there's a mistake from Oily Rags. He runs into the wall coming up through Quarry Bend and going through the cutting. Oh, and that allows Swingley to get right back behind Oily Rags, and now on the wing of Oily Rags here is now, I think Oily Rags might have taken some damage hitting the wall there, and that's what I was talking about earlier. It just takes one little mistake, and that could be you know, devastating for you. Thankfully, Swingly manages to mitigate the damage there, minimizing the impact into the wall, and making sure he gets another good gap out there. As we switch back over to Weiss, it looks like Weiss coming down the hill right now with Zephyr. And I think there's an incident right now. Paschetti is coming up over, I believe that is Reed Park, and getting through the uphill now, going back under the way. So people are spinning everywhere here as we cut back over to Weiss. And yeah, of course, we saw Weiss was getting close to Zephyr. Might be able to make a move if he's any closer, but yeah, that's all it takes here. It takes one little mistake, and that could be the end of your run. Thankfully, Oily Rags making sure that he survives and keeps moving.
Yeah, but I think you can take a look at every single one of these cars, minus Swingly in the top 5, and every single one of them have damage. Oily Rags would have taken some right and rear damage with that oversteer moment into the cutting. As we roll through, we see Weiss with front-end damage, Zephyr as well with front-end damage. We've seen Durg go into the wall at the start of the race, so maybe a little bit of right-side damage for them as far as I can remember. So Swingy really sitting here with the most clean car, and we talked about survival being a very important part of this race. Well, 15 minutes in, if almost the entire grid has damage, I mean, that's already looking good for Swingly's race if they're able to just keep that car alive and on track. As we see an incident for Lappy, I believe that is, at the bottom of Skyline there. A very, very dangerous place to be spun out, as they're able to get themselves into a much safer position and just try to get that car turned around. But I think the rear end of that car is actually quite damaged as we roll through. No, he's not comfortable to see a car cutting across the racing line like that, but clearly they were able to see the gap that no one was coming and starting to drive that Lamborghini down through the downhill. But I think that rear wing might be a little bit bent from that angle I can see. It's hard to tell with how much undulation and camber change you have, but yeah, no, certainly that rear wing is bent, so quite a bit of damage for the Lamborghini driver, and that's certainly going to play another detriment to their race.
I think we have a replay of Lappy's incident. I'm going to try and see if I can pull it up here, but it looked like just coming down Skyline, maybe a little much, or maybe after past Skyline entering the S's, might have just lost it, or maybe hit the curb on the inside. Oh no, just came in too hot, swung it in. Ooh, some massive hit there. And yeah, that's how Lappy ended up into the wall there. That's gonna need some repairs. As we cut back to Lapp, he's absolutely missed the entrance to the chase. I wonder if they're having some steering issues coming back around, just trying to rejoin safely, as I believe they're going to be pulling into the pit shortly.
Steering issues, or well, the rear end took all that damage, maybe turning in for the chase, and the rear end just letting go with no rear arrow, of course, but the front end still working. It's just gonna rip the car around. As we see Swingly now coming around to chase out Oily Rags, and the M2s are now starting to rear their heads as the GT3s are running through and catching them on merit. The 279 was looking for a move. There's a lot of sand kicked up on the exit there of the final corner, and Swingly's really mounting that pressure onto the rear end of Swingly. The rear wing, I don't know if it's able to handle all that pressure, as it is going to have to mount this challenge for about 45 minutes. I mean, the M2s are really going to be playing a big role in this race, as Vossi now the next target for these GT3s to overtake. I think they're going to clear them, but going through the rest of the M2 pack, you can see them right in the foreground there. These GT3s are certainly going to get stuck behind them, and there's not really anywhere over the top of this mountain that they can safely overtake. So this is where the risk and reward part of the race settles in. You see Oily Rags actually starting to back out, but this is going to be a mind game for them, because they can't overtake these M2s very easily. It's going to be a very, very dangerous position to put their car in, but yet they can't really just sit still, because the Swingly's putting pressure on the back of Oily's here. Is going to fill any gap that Oily's doesn't take. And it's going to put the M2s in a weird position coming around the inside. And going into McPhilmy, they're already set offline. And you can see the challenge that it poses for these drivers, having to completely change how they're taking the corners now through the downhill. Falling Azure, who is by no means a slow M2 driver, but just coasting down the hill. Oh, into Forest Elbow. That's a brave move for Oily Rags, and that's going to open up the gap for them, as now Swingly has to go around the outside and almost into the wall, as that gap's now opened up just from that one move to about 1.1 seconds. And there's almost nothing Swingly could have done about that, just due to the time that they caught that traffic.
Oh, and Oily Rags, I mean, that was a daring move. going through the dipper there into Forest Elbow that Oily Rags takes. But yeah, that's the measured risk you gotta take. Is Weiss is getting really close, and Zephyr almost makes contact, but manages to get a good braking zone there and manages to hold back behind as we go flashback over to Zezors now, coming up the hill right behind Araz and the Janetta. Another fight that's brewing up here. And of course, right now, this is for, I believe, the podium spot here for GT4. RS currently 8th overall, but 3rd place. And now, as we just hear the announcement, pit window has just opened for everyone. And it's hard to imagine that only now is the pit window opening, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, by this point, it feels like we're well past halfway point of the race, final 15 minutes maybe, but to say that we're only just over 20 minutes into this race is really a testament to how crazy it's been already, with every single lap offering some kind of excitement. And where you see Zezors really getting excited to chase down the rear wing of Oraz Volpez there as we roll through. This is the section where the Janetta is really going to start to struggle at straight line speed. Very, very well known that Janetta struggles with that, and the Mercedes quite strong itself on the straights. Maybe not the strongest car in the world, but starting to reel in the Janetta on the straight. And you can see that gap just close in massively between the two cars, and the Janetta's going to actually have to defend because the GT4 Mercedes is going to get a huge run around the outside into the chase, and hard on the brakes. Zezors is already cleared, Oraz, and is now going to lock their sights up ahead to Kestrel and really going to try to help out Sauce Dragon with that battle. But is the Janetta of Oraz going to be able to close up? No, starting to back off and just conceded that position wholly, and so it is going to be an RRP 1 and 3, trying to make it a 1 and 2, but Kestrel is the next driver to stand in their way. As Lappy, I think, had an incident there. You saw them sneaking up in the background, and a little bit of a moment for them on the exit of the final corner as we roll through, and the battle continues going up in the main straight.
Yeah, and we can see, of course, this is huge draft track. RS right on the back right now of, I believe, Zezors there, and it's just trying to make sure that they can get in. As meanwhile, I think there was an incident with Zephyr going into the chase, and yeah, Zephyr is now lost out of position 3, trying to rejoin track. And there's Durg just making sure they rejoin safely, and they do indeed. It's just incidents aplenty here at Bathurst. Just everyone just trying to keep their car out of the wall. Heck, if we run into sand or grass, but as long as they can keep it in, then they might very well be able to get a decent position. But that leaves Weiss right now in 3rd place overall. As we know, Weiss was behind Zephyr for a good margin since the start of this race, and now Weiss with some clear air, hoping to catch up with Swingley and Oily Rags. They may have an opportunity the next time they come by through traffic.
Yeah, but Weiss needs to beat Oily Rags on merit, no matter where they're at in terms of the points. As long as Weiss gets in front of Oily Rags, and they're even in the most minor points paying positions, this will turn the way of Weiss. So it is just a head-to-head battle of whoever finishes ahead of who. So this is going to be a very, very tall order, very big challenge for Weiss to try to take that battle all the way up to the 83 Aston Martin. But their sights are now set up to that front end of the pack, and they have clean air in front of them. They just need to get their head down, lock in, and really start to chase the drivers in front down. You saw Swingley dive down in the horizon there, and a big bump over the curb. A little bit too deep for Weiss, but they actually are able to keep it under control decently well and get the charge on. But now traffic is starting to rear its ugly head. The GT4s have now arrived on site.
Oh, and there's an incident. There's contact there between, I think that was Blade Wolf and Oily Rags, and now Swingley manages to lead from that little bump just temporarily, see if they can get through the kink here. But of course, Blade Wolf is right there, traffic behind both of them. Swingley is going to try and throw it into the kink just a little bit, and Oily Rags is just going to have to back off. And there's Weiss right there, and all it takes is a few corners, and there is Weiss right behind Oily Rags, the current champion and runner-up, in right next to each other, with a fight brewing here for the championship.
Yeah, huge challenge as Swingley has now snuck their way in front, and a big snap from Weiss trying to get that power down at the final corner. as we see one of the M2s of, I believe that is Wushels, getting in the way of the exit of the 83 and starting to just put a thorn in their side. The traffic really playing a challenge to these GT3s as you see them charging up the mountain. Zwingli giving a little bit of a flash to the lapped car, the lapped Ferrari, a Phaser, I believe that is, trying to just clear. And actually, that's going to be massive for Zwingli because they're able to clear all the traffic. And now the rest of the grid needs to just filter through this traffic. The lap car and also a GT3 lower car, GT4 lower class car. Almost a moment for Phaser with Weiss there. He rolled through the cutting, but this GT4 Camaro is going to be a massive challenge for, I believe, Weiss, because, yeah, Oily Rags is going to be able to clear them, but Weiss is now going to be stuck behind them as they go through Reed Park, and then we charge towards Solman. Is there going to be a gap for Weiss to sneak by? You see how much time they're losing, and yeah, they take to the inside of Solman, getting ready to go to the inside of McPhilmy, but that's so much time that they lost. Look at that gap, and you saw them nose to tail coming into turn 2, and that gap's open all the ways up to about 2 seconds between P2 and 3. So that's just how much traffic is playing into this race.
Yeah, traffic giveth and traffic taketh away, and of course, you know, we see here, I mean, Oily Rags, an unfortunate part of that incident with that was Blade Wolf there, coming down through Forest Elbow into Conrad Strait. I believe I have a replay of that incident. We'll take a look here, because that could have been a race ender. So we can take a look here. There is Blade Wolf right in front, and right there we're currently following Oily Rags. Is coming down the Forest Elbow, and coming through that straight here, it goes inside, and gets tipped just a bit by Blade Wolf, and yeah, just manages to come back. Thankfully not hit the wall. And then Weiss coming into the pits, runs a little bit off track there. This comes in there, and I think Weiss this is going to be interesting now. Do we take repairs here? Will it be enough, or will it even be worth it? And who's going to do it and who's not? As we then go back to Zwingli as, of course, the beneficiary of all of that traffic, with the cleanest car too, Zwingli, coming out with their blender Porsche now up on top. Oily Rags is catching up. Caught up about half a second from the last lap, but managing to stay in the lead, the beneficiary of the incident earlier from Blade Wolf.
Yeah,
and speaking of Blade Wolf, I think Blade Wolf had a massive incident. Looking at, that's Conrad Strait, maybe coming out of Forest Elbow. It's limping, as a matter of fact. That's a massive front-end smash there. Ooh, I wonder if they maybe took a little bit too much in through Forest Elbow.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big impact for the front end of that Aston Martin, and it was very, very late. We saw them slow through the exit of Forest Elbow as we take a look back at what happened to Blade Wolf there. Now, actually, a huge incident coming down through Skyline and the S's. We talked about how dangerous that was. We saw it earlier with Lappy as well, and now the GT4s are starting to get bit by it as the tires start to wear. The unpredictability starts to settle, and actually, I think almost a secondary incident with Paschetti. It's hard to tell from that angle, but danger everywhere on track here.
Yeah, and so right now the battle is between Zwingli and Oily Rags. Oily Rags is now already up within a second, and of course, getting the draft here, that's massive on this course. You gain about half a second here when you are behind someone coming through Conrad Strait. So right now it's the battle for the lead, and Zwingli hits the grass. Manages to spin it just a little bit, but catches it, and now has to give up the position to Oily Rags, and with that, Oily Rags inherits the lead of this race, and also by quite some margin as Zwingli dives into the pits.
Yeah, Zwingli decided to lose the least amount of time as possible and immediately dives into the pits there with that lack of momentum. And I mean, right around the halfway point of the race, so it's not like they're going to be compromising themselves or anything. So a good idea, of course, as well as they have a good eye on what traffic is doing. They have a better sight on what the relative traffic around them looks like than we do. So possibly looking for a gap. I think they'll actually come out right in front of this group that we have eyes on here, and you can see quite a bit of clean air. And of course, Weiss there, that bright red car going down the main straight, is in clean air, and it was who was directly fighting Zwingli and also, of course, our race leader. So I think that that was the right call there, but The grid really starting to mix up here as we start to look at the strategy battles kicking off. All of our M2s minus Randomy and Wushel have taken no pit stops, and they need to still come in and serve them. And we're going to see a little bit of variance there. RK has actually dove into the pits. Azure looked like was diving into the pits as well. RK stopping in the entry of the pits. I'm curious if they had some kind of issue there that caused that. But Azure with a very big dive into the pits too, very close to the wall. They couldn't tell if they had contact with it, but the M2's leaving no stone unturned in terms of their pace.
Yeah, coming back now, we're on Kestrel and Sauce. Another battle that's been taking place here pretty much the entirety of this event. And of course, Kestrel now has some damage on the right side of that vehicle. You can tell they've been pushing these cars hard, and pushing it hard just ends up with scratched paint and dented bumpers. And so Kestrel just managing to hold back, holding to Sauce Dragon, hopefully going to take another spot here. But of course, right now, you're looking at, I believe this is for P4. No, actually, no. This is for overall lead, as Sauce Dragon and Kestrel have pit already. And Zizor's, Arez, and Cammers have yet to pit. Zizor's now pitting and Arez pitting. Well, talk about commentator predictions there. As we see them coming down through, Conrad straight back into chase. And just, I think everyone is learning at this point, you gotta just stick back. The opportunity will come when they make a mistake. Don't force it.
Yeah, mistakes are plenty. The mountain does love to bite back whenever you try to challenge it. But of course, we've seen Kestrel and Sauce Dragon. We predicted this right at the start of the race once Kestrel lost that lead, that this was going to be a battle all the ways to the end. And it looks like Kestrel's still unable to get past Sauce Dragon, but matching the pace every single lap and really looking for just any kind of opening. The traffic may even play a part to open up this battle and try to give Kestrel some kind of moment to just sneak past. But look how far ahead they are. That's Skylar Vixen in the background. Akari not even services their pit yet, and they are that far back, about half the straightaway. The rest of the GT4 field in the pits, and they have not even come out yet until after Skylar Vixen. But we see Oily Rags coming out of the pits now. The final of our lead pack GT3s to service themselves in the pits, and actually I believe our final GT3 overall to service the pits is going to be coming out and serving themselves onto the main straight. They're going to be sitting directly in front of Weiss and Swingley, who we saw Swingley have that incident. There's your gap behind, sitting about 1.5 seconds to Weiss behind. We've seen that gap disappear in corners though, so not like they're safe in any ways, Oily Rags, but at least right now they don't have to be keeping their eyes glued on that rearview mirror.
No, and I don't, looking at the time splits of them spending in pits, I'm not sure if any of them took repairs, or if they were very short. Oily Rags and Weiss having pretty much the same pit in time, as I think there was an incident with Kestrel, and Kestrel, that is the S's. One of the worst places you could actually spin there, as Skylar Vixen gets right by, and Kestrel just trying to not get in the way, as I believe there is another car coming up close. That is, I believe, the 574 Phaser, and Kestrel manages to get it turned around the right side and back to it, but that was a massive loss in time there. And I believe Skylar, who's yet to pit, leaves Sauce Dragon with a, I believe, 18-second margin after that incident. That was a massive ouch.
Yeah, well managed by Kestrel to get out of the way there as best they could. I mean, we saw how it opened up a lane for Skylar to kind of get through there. Much as we normally don't like seeing movement, I mean, Kestrel was in probably one of the most dangerous places possible, and that car really does look like it's out of control now at this point. So I'd imagine Kestrel's going to be coming into the pits as a spin. Don't come back. Oh, holding the brakes best they could as Blade Wolf sneaks by the Janetta of Oraz, and then I believe, who's that? That's behind him. Zizor's sneaking by as well. There's our lead battle as well. Weiss and Oily Rags coming by. Cohen in the other GT4. So Kestrel really falling down the order. Surely going to come in the pit here for that damage, and yeah, they are. So I mean, that Audi looked fast there in the hands of Kestrel. Kestrel really pushing that, but just too much damage right now to continue in its current state. Going to come in for a quick repair, maybe a quick tire change just in the process as well, but really unfortunate for Kestrel because they were looking so strong in this event.
Yeah, it's with the Audi, I mean, they were on the back of Sauce for the longest time, although the mountain loves to claim its victims, and you can only hold on for so long until the mountain eats you alive. But you know, that's just how it is here, especially the margins. They're so razor thin between what's fast and what's good and what's slow and what will end up into the wall. And you know, as an example there, that's just what happens when just a little bit of maybe a lapse, a momentary lapse in judgment, maybe just out of focus just for a split second, and it's brutal. The mountain takes no prisoners.
Not at all. And then you see how long of a pit stop Kestrel is going to have here. Skylar Vixen came in, serviced their pit stop after Kestrel, and is still coming out well before them. So several seconds of repair time for Kestrel, maybe in the minutes, because of just the state of that car. So very, very unfortunate for the 46. And you saw the pace that they had to put the pressure on the Sauce Dragon the entire stint. Just an unfortunate tiny little bobble. And with the Audi, it on top of it being on the mountain, it's a very, very reactive car. The mountain's a very, very dangerous place to have any mistakes. It just the perfect combo to just send that car into the wall. But our M2's really starting to heat up here. Simon Luck and Saber still need to service their pit stop, but then the overall P2 battle we saw of Azure and Randomy here as well, or overall the M2 P2 battle is going on right here. We saw RK in the foreground also leading. There are effective leader in the M2s are just trying to open that gap a little bit more. It's never really opened up much more than that. RK kind of got open early in the race, and then that gap's just kind of hovered around 5 or so seconds for the rest of the race, and really hard to see that gap changing much more without the influence of traffic.
Yeah, no, I mean, wow, as we're watching Randomy and Azure, I mean, here's the difference. Randomy keeps catching up to Azure at the beginning of the lap, but around 5 4/10. But once you get up the mountain, there's really no place to pass, and so you just end up behind your competitor here, and this would be for top 5. If Randomy can get past Azure here, actually, that'd be top 4. Oh, yeah, top 4, as a matter of fact. P4 for Azure's in their class right now. But as we look ahead of the field, we see Oily Rags here. Of course, there's Weiss right behind, managing to actually piece something together out of the stint so far. Just trying to hold to the back of Oily Rags, making sure that Weiss can be there and pounce on any mistakes. It goes a little wide coming out of Griffin's mount there. Almost taps the wall. You just got to keep it in there, keep it right behind Oily Rags, keep the pressure going, and just got to be there to pounce when they make a mistake.
Yeah, and Weiss has done a really good job of closing this gap back up. We talked about it. Whoever finishes in front of who is going to be winning this AmChamp and overall championship. So it is going to be a challenge. The pressure is certainly mounting between these final, or our top 2 AM drivers in the final 22 minutes of this race. And you know that Oily Rags is going to be looking in the mirrors. That BMW, the turbo-powered BMW inline 6 back there, is going to be really pumping out the power to try to get the run down the straight. Swingley as well, trying to bring it back up as best that they can. Of course, the traffic pulled them back. You see those GT4s, a train of GT4s that would have slowed them down like quite a ways. Of course, not working in their favor. That gap to open up to about 13 seconds now. So Swingley definitely not benefiting from the traffic, but we've also seen it go both ways. We've seen Oily Rags, we've seen Swingley lose tons of time to that traffic, so there's no doubt that it likely will swing back their way at some point, as we see the inside, or the outside of Zizor's is going into that next position. Dirk very deep, and oh my goodness, Zizor is able to spot that and keep the Mercedes safe, but now the Janetta of Oraz has an opportunity, looking to the outside of the final corner of Murray's. Are they going to dive deep under the brakes? No, it looks like Zizor's going to just outbrake them a little bit, but Oraz early on the power, maybe a little bit of wheel spin, because Zizor's able to get the drive out a little bit better, and Biscotti actually is going to be sneaking up into that next spot and taking, I believe actually, no, they're actually a lap down because of some damage, so they're just trying to fight their way through just to survive this race, and actually chase down Lappy not too much further up the road from them. But you can see, I mean, just the chaos of all these classes of cars coming together. Zephyr in the background now looking to try to chase down Dirk, who's in that bluey Ferrari up front. So that's a battle for position, as well as the GT4 battle for position that is just rippling through this track, and it is just battles intertwined everywhere.
Yeah, and then the traffic is going to throw everything out of whack here. It's going to allow people to come in. And Oily Rags, I saw, had a little bit of a slowdown, got a little slow coming in. I think they're hitting traffic. Yes, indeed, they are hitting traffic. That's allowing Weiss to get up right along the back of Oily Rags here, just trying to make sure that Oily Rags stays out in front. You got to manage the traffic well. And so far, Oily Rags has managed to do that in spades and manages to keep momentum going. Weiss trying to get on the power early, but can't really do it. As you can see, that BMW is just swirling around, trying to get through any way they can, but Weiss just holding back right now, just biding their time. But of course, with about 20 minutes to go, you're gonna find you're gonna run out of time real quick. We'll see if Weiss will make it move soon as going to the braking zone. Weiss goes a bit deep, comes almost into the back of Oily Rags there, and the battle is on and heating up. Both drivers now trying to make sure they stay on track and survive.
Yeah, that BMW looking very, very twitchy under power, and you can see that actually Weiss had to get on the brakes in the middle of the acceleration zone just to not run into the back of Oily Rags. Such is the rotation of the BMW. They're able to get it straight so much quicker and just get the car planted. But Oily Rags able to carry the momentum that they need out of the corner just enough on the straightaways to just drive this car out. So really trimmed out is Oily Rags. Weiss, I think, maybe a little bit less aero and just relying on hanging on for dear life, letting the straight line do the work, and then get it rotated in the mid-corner, drive it out. But Vic now is going to be the next M2 to pose a little bit of a roadblock, and actually it's going to work in the favor of Oily Rags. Weeks is now stuck behind as we see Phaser going into the wall around the outside of the cutting, and all of our drivers actually able to get it slowed down very nicely. Very well managed from them to not get caught up in Phaser's accident. Phaser doing well to keep it on the outside there as well, not bounce back across track. But that's a big time loss, and Swingley, who we talked about earlier, has already gained over 3.5 seconds on our lead pair here. So looking to try to make a challenge to get back up to this lead pack as well. As, of course, Weiss, our main protagonist, is only half a second back from Oily Rags. And just this top three battle will not give up. The traffic just pulling them closer and closer together, and even actually going back a little bit further to Durg and Zephyr, who are on a big challenge with each other in traffic, of course pulling apart with them. Saber, the M2, now being the roadblock as Zephyr tries to filter their way through. Durg struggling as we go through McPhilmy Park. Zephyr not really able to commit as much as they would have wanted to as we roll through, and just each car with a challenge and more traffic as it's going to be Oily Rags having to navigate an M2 and a GT4. Weiss trying to find their way through. Both the GT3s taking a little bit timid, but is Weiss going to take a look to the inside? No, they are not. Oily Rags going to try to sneak their way through the traffic around the outside. Weiss following them through, and just everywhere you look, I mean, our gaps everywhere that I can see are just red, showing us battle after battle. So this traffic is just playing in the favor of everyone.
Yeah, and the thing, as I said before, traffic give it, traffic take it the way. Weiss was right in the back of Oily Rags, but unfortunately coming to Murray's corner, you know, some traffic coming the outside there, and I think I see a car stopped. That's 574 Phaser, and that is the Dipper. Oh, that's one of the worst places again. We saw earlier, I think it was the Lexus. No. Trying to remember who it was earlier, but anyway, yeah, it's thankfully backing up. There are no cars around, and hopefully Phaser will start getting out. Ooh, looks like his steering he may be having some issues, as that car does not want to stay on the track right now, and I think Phaser's just going to try and crawl their way. They might want to pick it up. They got to get off of the downhill zone before a lot of traffic comes, but it looks like the next group isn't going to be by for another few seconds. I think the only car that's coming up is the number 2. Oh, yeah, looks like that car can't steer to the left. They may have to just pit it, and that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, you could see that front right tire was actually bent and towed out to the outside of the car, so it was not allowing it to turn to the left-hand side. That's why they could get it to the right, but that front right tire likely just completely destroyed the steering on that. But we actually had a code 50, thus is why they were crawling through the entire grid was neutralized from that point on. But that doesn't matter to these two. These two are just trying to challenge each other the best they can the last 16 minutes of this championship, and still a championship to be decided. And it is tit for tat here. It is mano y mano as we roll through once more through the chase. The BMW just trying to close that gap, maybe a little bit weak here as we wasn't fully up to temperature. So once we were concluding that code 50, that Aston Martin just looking a little bit better right off that launch off the restart. But that traffic we know plays a massive part, so as soon as Weiss finds their rhythm, any traffic brings them back into this, and Oily Rags has got a massive challenge on their head. And you could see in the foreground there for just a moment, traffic is looming and has already passed through turn 1, and these two drivers are surely going to catch them this lap.
Yeah, thankfully, I think that is just the Maserati of Cohen, the number 2 Maserati there. They're going to have some space after that extra. Matter of fact, quite a bit of space. So what Oily Rags wants to do is really just get through this traffic and then go flying. You know, I think if I'm Oily Rags right now, I know I have the advantage on track. The pace is there. Oily Rags has been, you know, putting in good lap after good lap. And as a matter of fact, has the fastest lap of a 2:03.5, with Weiss' fastest lap of 2:04.4. Of course, that was in the early stages. We see Weiss go a little bit on the outside there, the corner there in the cutting, almost hits the wall and slides. And so, you know, Weiss is struggling, and I should see that in my mirrors. And so you just got to keep it clean. Just got to keep driving your race. You have the pace, and you just got to not fall into any incidents here. And I think Oily Rags may have it. But of course, knowing that this is multi-class, going through Cohen, they're going side by side there, coming down into Skyline. But yes, just keeping it on track, keeping your nose forward, keeping it clean, and you may have this one. But anything can happen in the last 15 minutes of this race.
And I can't stress the importance of that dive that Weiss made enough, because that was a very dangerous move going around the outside of Skyline there, but that saved them about 3 or 4 seconds to Oily Rags. Like, they could have easily lost in a moment for Zephyr coming through McPhilmy, and I think there was a lot of traffic involved there, possibly contact with another driver. We'll have to take a look back at that if we can, but you can see all of this traffic coming through. Taking a look back really quickly, it's going to be Zephyr rolling through. I mean, we've seen Reed Park, we've seen Solman as well, but look at all that traffic as they start to chase down Dirk. Possibly a driver a little bit slower, a late dive. Oh, just too much deceleration through McPhilmy. Just put that nose into the ground and just unsettled the rear. Too much for Zephyr. And that Viper Sadies goes around, and actually a moment for Randomy as well. One of our leading M2 drivers is in the wall.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think we're going to call another code 50. That is, again, the Dipper. And a horrible place to go. It thankfully has a little bit of time. There's a couple of seconds. I think the number 97 is coming up. But yeah, thankfully, Randomy and the 666 car manages to keep it going. And I think we have a replay of the incident here as well. Oh, there was a massive hit between Azure into the wall. I think Randomy, hits the wall coming down through Skyline. Manages to come through. And I think maybe makes contact, with the wall and Zipper. And that's... I think that's the KTM driver of, which TIG gang drivers? I think that was Parcho, yeah. And now, looks like Randomy has damage as well, and that's not going to bode well for their chances here coming to the closing stages of this race.
Yeah, I mean, that's really unfortunate. It's just being offline that much, especially in the M2s, which are so slow to react to any kind of input you give them. It's just so hard to adapt to something like that. I mean, you're going offline too wide through what probably the most dangerous corner on the track in terms of commitment and being offline. So I mean, it's hard to fault Randomy. Of course, they did come in contact with the wall, but end of the day, I mean, I think most people, if you're not in that situation or prepared for it, it's hard to say anything about that. So Randomy still, I mean, sitting in a strong position right now. Currently sitting in P6 or on M2. So not a bad position at all, but of course they would have liked to be sitting back in that lead pack battle with RK Azure, and I believe they were battling Simon Luck at the time. So a little bit unfortunate, but not the end of the world for their race right now.
Yeah, no, not the end. I mean, there's still some time left. And as we finally see everyone just spacing out a bit, just lap traffic working their way, we can check in on our leader here, our overall leader. right now in GT3 and overall. That is Oily Rags there, up in first, followed by Weiss in second, and then Swingley in third. Right now, Oily Rags with a 4-second gap to Weiss. Just has to keep their nose clean and has to keep it going. Then checking in on the GT4, we have Sauce Dragon just crossing the line here. They're in first place with a decent 40-second margin close to it, to Zizor's behind. Sauce has just been running a super nice race, and of course had that huge battle earlier with the Audi and just manages to get the better of it, keeping themselves clean. And of course Zizor's in second there, followed by Araz, who's about 6 seconds back from Zizor's for your top 3 in GT4. And then finally in the pros, in the M2s right now, our leader RK with a decent margin of about, I believe that is 6 seconds from Azure. As you can see in the background of your screen there in that gray BMW, RK just trying to make sure they can bring it home too and get a win here today at Bathurst. Of course, Azure in second, and then behind them, another 10 seconds back from Azure is Simon Luck. And there you go, your top 3 from each of the classes as we reach the closing stages in the last 10 minutes of Bathurst.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, all of that, Oily Rags lost about a second to Weiss, so that gap is coming down. Of course, you'd imagine in a short succession, likely traffic induced, but that still opens the door for Weiss. It always puts that seed of doubt in the leader's head if you know you're being hunted down, that there's a possibility something might be happening here. And there you can see the M2 that likely would have held up Oily. Weiss is likely going to grab them on the straight, and it could be a little bit of a danger for Oily if this traffic decides to not play nice with them for the rest of the event here. We roll through that gap, sits at about 3.8 seconds. It's up to about 4, give or take. It moves up and down as we roll through each of these corners.
That's Paschetti.
I think in this incident.
Yeah, that's Paschetti again in the dipper there, just making sure that they don't get into an incident. But there's a gaggle of cars coming. That's JPEG, almost runs into it, and there's a group of cars heading around the corner now. You should see them on their screen. They're all slowing down, and yeah, I think they'll be clear after the Janetta passes for a few seconds. Paschetti's going to try and get it going. Oh, unable to. It still has a little bit of time, and there they almost oversteer there, but they correct it and manage to get moving right before I think the number 15 of Vossi comes back. And so, thankfully, Paschetti can get going again, as I think Laparcho is now in an incident. Oh, Laparcho is now in the pits. I think there was a major accident with him. I think we'll try and see if we can get a replay of that going.
Yeah, as we roll through here, Laparcho just taking a run down the main straight, and we see them getting chased down by the Audi at Kestrel. Is there a look here? Maybe a little bit of a moment. Maybe. I think there's just an equipment failure there. I mean, it just goes straight on.
Yeah, no, I think there might have been. But meanwhile, I think there was a massive incident with Weiss. I think Weiss earlier, we're going to take a replay. I saw something light up. They lost a ton of time. And I think this is coming over. Let's see. This is Suleiman Park and McPhillamy coming up. Oh, yeah, it runs into Werschel, and oh, massive time loss for Weiss. And then just like that, I think that's Swingley there. That's Swingley now caught up to Weiss there. And that all happened in the course of what happened with Laparcho's incident.
Yeah, but I mean, Weiss is now, that gap's opened up to 22 seconds right now, so that incident really backed up Weiss to Oily Rags, and at this point, you'd have to imagine, barring any incident, that's going to be Oily Rags able to secure everything here. But Swingley now really mounting that pressure on Weiss. Of course, with that tap there, Weiss, you'd imagine, is going to be picking up a little bit of damage. You could see that hood's actually popped up in the BMW, so definitely damage being nursed by the 366 BMW, looking to hang on to the P2 right now, but Swingley sees blood in the water. That gap sitting about half a second and only closing, as well as the lap traffic of Phaser. They're going to be feeding a little bit of dirty air to Weiss up front. Actually, it looks like they're pulling over for the blue flags. Yeah, to let them by. So this does boil down to mano-a-mano fight as we look over back at Wuschel, who's going to be taking a fight with, I believe, Denak sitting in the back there. This is going to be for P7 overall and M2. And just looking for a move that's not really there. Those M2s so hard to get a run with just how that they are driven, having to
I
wait
think
for the
something
Conrad
happened with
straight.
Cameras. Yeah, no, Cameras. Well, that's the leader, Oily Rag, stuck behind him, coming through the dipper there, just letting him through. Ooh, manages to touch the wall a bit. I just now trying to struggle to get through Forest Elbow and get through it there. I lost a little bit of time, but I think overall it's not going to matter for Oily Rags. But lucky for Cameras, manages to hit the wall there, but just continues on.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of incidents coming through there at Skyline. At this point, I think most of our drivers should be in that survival mode too. A lot of these positions have kind of been settled out, so you aren't really going to be gaining too much, but some drivers are still fighting for something to gain. We see Swingley here really challenging the pace of that BMW and looking to gain that second step on the podium, as we see the Porsche actually gaining its very, very slightly on the BMW here. So maybe a slight straight line advantage as we start to look into the chase. The right-hand kink, it looks like a little defensive from Weiss, and hard under the brakes. Contact from Swingley as we go into the chase, and it looks like the BMW of Weiss is around. Yes, it completely spun around, and that's going to be damage for both cars. Swingley waiting for Weiss to recover, but unable to get that car straight. This is going to be very damaging because this is going to open up the door for Dirk to start charging back in. Swingley starting to get back on track after Weiss, so that position does get returned, as many of our drivers are obliged to do. They do show that sportsmanship if they know an incident was their fault. So good sportsmanship from Swingley, and it looks like maybe some front end damage. They go very, very deep into the final corner, but what damage is Weiss kind of nursing at this point, because that front end is torn to pieces. You can only imagine the rear now.
Yeah, and you saw the aero advantage that Swingley had. I mean, it was absolutely massive. Weiss had so much drag because of most likely what happened to the front, and so Swingley just manages to catch up. But now, I mean, with nearly a 40-second gap, Oily Rags just has to maintain and manage it as we reach the 4-minute 20-second mark here. And then as we look further down the order, we have Saber here closing in with Vossi as they're coming down through McFilmy Park into Skyline here, and they're trying to get the best of what is now, I believe, P4. No, the podium here. I'm sorry, no, P4, yes. So that Saber can just snatch one more spot if they can maintain that gap behind Vossi, and hopefully get that aero advantage here coming down into Forest Elbow, as I think right behind, that is the number 97. I think we saw him earlier. That Camaro, I think it was Cammers, that had that incident earlier in the Dipper.
Yeah, but I think Cameron's going to be sitting behind as Saber now looks for a move on Vossi. We see the straight line advantage of not having that damage, plus a little bit of a slingshot from these M2s. We've talked about how draft-oriented they are. So Vossi really pulling back up to the rear wing of Saber, not wanting to let them go, and maybe stick behind and just kind of 2 laps to go. Maybe try to line up an overtake, a re-overtake back at the end of the race that they aren't going to be able to defend from. But it's not the only thing on track. Oh, and a little bit of an off track for both them and Cammers. Vossi is into the wall. Cammers taking evasive action to the inside. But that's going to open up that battle quite a bit. Saber now able to stretch their legs, maybe breathe a little bit. But, oh, that's not what Vossi wanted. He really wanted to stick behind in that slipstream and just kind of get pulled up for the last 2 laps.
Yeah, and as we look back, Swingley is on the back of Weiss now, already caught up after that battle. There was 2 seconds behind him, and I think that's just how much damage Weiss has right now. It's just losing a lot of time through the straights and the corners. The last lap from Weiss was a 2:08.0, with Swingley with a 2:06.1. Weiss is going to need to hold on for dear life at the closing stages here as they come in through the mountain straight up the quarry bend, as Swingley has a look at the inside but dives back into Weiss, sticking behind, and it's only a matter of time before Swingley throws it in there. But will it be during one of the uphill sections or the downhill, or will he wait through Forest Elbow?
Well, this traffic is really going to play a part in that because that's Randomie as well as Lappy in the Lamborghini GT3, one of the lap cars. Looks like to the inside. That's a very dangerous place to be making that move, but they get it working inside of Reed Park, and then we go all the ways over towards Sheen and then McPhilmy, and they both drivers able to get through quite well. No time lost relative between each other as we roll down into Skyline, but then we know how good Swingley is on that straightaway compared to the BMW. As long as they're able to hold close to the BMW through here, which it looks like they've done a very good job of doing, just keeping it glued to the rear wing of that 366. Now getting it set up for Forest Elbow. Get a good run on the straight. It looks like Weiss a little bit deep, and a good run out of the corner from Swingley. That gap holding steady, and this slipstream only going to play a massive part in this gap. But of course that M2 up there as well, you could see just a glimpse of it, might play a part in where Swingley can position their car. Are they able to clear them in time? It looks like maybe had to lift out because Weiss is now starting to gain. We roll through into the chase, and it will be not a look for Swingley, but one more lap to go. We did get the announcement that the leader is on the final lap, and that is Oily Legs looking to take this final tour around track. One little bit of, a lot of traffic actually to navigate, but one of our M2s to get past one of our leading M2s, our P3 I believe overall, but Oily's not bothered by that fact as we roll through for the final tour up through Reed Park for the final time, and getting tipped over the top of the mountain, but Swingley still looking for that move. Gap sitting at about 0.2 of a second, and it's closing ever so slightly. Is a little bit of a moment between all the traffic up ahead, slowing down on the apex, and it looks like Weiss is going to be benefiting a little bit from that traffic. Swingley going very wide due to the traffic. Lappy now on the inside there, conceding that position, but Swingley's lost massively due to this traffic, all the ways down to about 2 seconds when it was just 0.2 leading up that main straight. A massive opening from the traffic here, and I don't see anything that I think Weiss is going to catch to open or close this gap back up.
Nope, and I'm looking at my map now. Weiss is clear all the way up to the number 123, and that's a good, I think, 7, 8, 9 seconds away as we see Oily Rags here coming down Conrad straight for the last time. Heading up a little bit of traffic, but I don't think it's going to matter much as he makes his way through the chase and to the penultimate corner here for the last time. Oily Rags coming around onto the last corner, Murray's corner. He just needs to navigate through that, and we will have our multi-class madness champion coming around the final corner, Murray's corner. Oily Rags crosses the line as the Simufur multi-class madness champion here today.
Yeah, an excellent drive from Oily Rags as well coming through. Looks like the gap on Swingley opened up even more, so it's gonna be a P2 for Weiss. P2 in the race, P2 in the championship. An excellent drive from them. Unfortunately, things not fully panning out in their favor. A little bit of an incident outside of their control, but as well as just damage and just the chaos of the multi-class madness, of course, just playing into it every step of the way as we roll through. And it's gonna be Sauce Dragon currently leading home a very, very dominant win right now. All they have to do is navigate the final section of track, and right now, I mean, they've been playing second fiddle to Zzors this entire championship. Every single round they've had to kind of sit behind, but today they have just been absolutely dominant in that Mercedes GT4, currently sitting P6 overall. Just a testament to how clean that they've been able to keep this car. And for the first time in multi-class madness, the 73 RRP is going to finish directly ahead of Zzors and take the win. But with that being said, a little bit further back, Zzors is going to be finishing behind them, closing out the championship as well. RK, the only M2 left on their lap, is going to be closing out basically a victory lap at this point. It doesn't mean too much for the championship at the end of the day with how far ahead Simon Luck's going to be. They will close out to be our champion, but RK taking home a very dominant win, a well-deserved victory lap here as they just can enjoy the final tour here down the Conrad Straight. You see Oily Rags in the back, such as how this traffic has played out as we roll through. And here's your GT4 silver champ of multi-class madness rolling through the final corner. This is Zezor's coming through for the final corner of the championship and comes across to secure that GT4 silver championship for multi-class madness. Of course, provisionally, but I believe those gaps are way too big to be closed for Zezor's. And then for the final time, RK is going to close out that final corner to take a win inside of that TCX category. I believe their second win in the M2 class, but it's going to be Simon Luck who finishes out the championship on top.
Wow. What? Well, we knew it was going to be an incident-filled race. We knew it was going to be filled with excitement, but what a finish there. We weren't expecting the traffic to play, I think, that big of an effect, but it was massive at the end of the day. As we can take a look at our timing here. I mean, of course, you see the Oily Rags, of course, your overall winner here and championship winner. Congratulations to Oily Rags. Well done. Just managing to take that Aston Martin all the way to the end.
Yeah, beautifully Aston done. Martin really proved to be a very consistent machine for Oily Rags. I mean, everyone else showed a lot of danger and just really a race of survival for them, but Oily really just looked like they were just cruising at their pace for the majority of that race.
Yeah, no, I mean, other than Swingley having a massive start, which was impressive to say the least, Oily Rags just hanging in there. A couple of, brushes with the wall, couple of loose moments there, but managing to hang on for the championship, and that's what you have to do if you want to win, and especially when you have a close championship battle. But Weiss put up a good fight, was there all the way up until the closing stages. Just some unfortunate luck there on track, but still a good result in P2.
Absolutely. And then we transfer over to the GT4s, and it was Sauce Dragon finally taking home the win, and honestly, it never looked in question that entire race. Of course, Zezor's is going to be finishing up front and taking that overall that GT4 championship win, but the Sauce Dragon really just drove a beautiful race this entire event. Zezor's blocking out that RRP 1-2 as they've been doing for the majority of this season. I mean, I believe it's 100% podium ratio for the RRP drivers. And with the exception of Orez sneaking a win, I believe it's been a 1-2 almost every single event that they have been able to complete.
Yeah, that's impressive, especially for a team effort. You'd love to see, yourselves on top like that. And it just means, you push each other, you push the team. And, when you see results like this, it's always massive, and it's always a big celebration. And then finally, on the pro side, I mean, RK taking a impressive one-lap victory over the rest of the field. I think out of everybody, RK was probably the cleanest. I don't recall seeing much that RK has been involved in, and that translated to a massive, dominant victory here today in Pro.
I mean, you could see it with just looking at RK's car at the end of the race. It looked clean as a whistle. It looked like it hadn't been touched all race. Compared to every one of the other M2s, had some kind of scuff, bruise, or battle scar of some kind, whether from the start of the race, some fault of their own, or maybe someone else's. But RK was able to keep that car alive, undamaged. I mean, kind of testament to that first lap when we saw Grim Lilith go run away with the race and what Brands Hatchet was so long ago. But they kept the car clean, and RK obviously took notes from that and just copied it over to here.
Yep, and that'll do it for the race today. And closing for us here at Bathurst, I gotta say, out of all the drivers, who would you take your pick for driver of the day?
I mean, it's hard to say anything outside of Oily because of the fact that they kept it clean. They had pressure from Weiss. They had pressures from Swingley. They had to manage the traffic. That was very unkind to them, might I say. It was many times trying to beat them down and pull them back into the cars behind, but they were able to manage it. A couple scary moments, maybe just a little bit of a slide on the cutting that caught them out, but outside of that, I mean, it felt like a nearly flawless race for them. It's really hard for me to say anything else, especially with the pressure that they had to deal with.
Oh, yeah, of course. And given I would concur with Oily Rags being the driver of the day, I mean, to start on pole and lose it within the first couple of corners, but keep the consistency where you just keep that pace, you keep it clean, and you manage the traffic as well as you do, you'll find yourself in victory lane every time, and that's exactly what Oily Rags did today. And yeah, I totally agree. He is my driver of the day.
Yeah, very, very strong race from him.
Well, that's been it. Our championship here with Multi-Class Madness at Simufur. It's been a wonderful pleasure being here in the broadcast booth. I'm Paliku'i Grant. I've been with Plasma. And of course, you guys, we hope to see you guys again in our next championship, whenever it may be. And we hope to see you again soon. Stay fast, stay on track, everybody, and we'll see you all next time.